We continue now at the top of Daf Beis Amid Beis in Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf Tube. On the previous Amid, the Mishnah was discussing how do we know that there are 23 judges on the mini Sanhedrins, and the Mishnah established there has to be at least 22, and the Mishnah now continues, Ve'ein Bezdin Shakal, and you can't have a Bezdin with an even number of judges, and so therefore, Mosifan Aleim Orecha, therefore we add one more, Harekan Esrim Ushlosha, that comes out to 23 judges. And the Mishnah continues, V'chami Yehei Bo'ir Utehei Ru'uya L'Sanhedrin. How many people have to be in a city? What does the population of a city need to be in order that it should be fit to have such a Sanhedrin? Meya Ve'esrim, the Mishnah says, 120 people. Rabbi Nechemia says, Masayim Ushloshim, 230 people. Keneged Sari Asaros, and that corresponds to the ministers of tens. What it means to say is that each judge, so to speak, is a minister over 10 people in the population. Therefore, 23 judges, that's 230 people in the population. And Rashi explains, Ve'ein Bezdin Shakal, you can't have an even number of judges in a court. Ein Osin Bezdin Zugos, Shem Yechelku L'Chatzoin, Havalu Palgo Palga. You can't have a situation where if they're going to split in half, it's going to be exactly 50-50. You have to have an odd number. V'lo Mashkachas La Hatayoscha L'Tova Al Pi Echad. You're not going to have Hatayoscha L'Tova, which means, again, when it comes to declaring someone innocent, even one judge extra, if there's one judge majority that says innocent, we say innocent. You're not going to have that unless you have an odd number of judges. Hilkach Mosifan Alein Orecha. Therefore, we add one more. Uv Gemara Parach. Now the Gemara will ask, Kevan De'ein Bezdin Shakal, since it's true that you cannot have an even number in a court, Umatzrachas Esrim Ushlosha, and therefore you're going to need to have 23. So Hatoya L'Ral Pishnayim Lo Mashkachas La. Now we're back to the question the Mishnah asked before. You're not going to have a situation now where you have Hatoya L'Ra, where you have a situation of majority that are saying that the person is guilty. You're not going to have that with two extra if you now have 23. And Rashi continues, the Mishnah said that according to the Tanakama, a city has to have Meya Ve'esrim, 120 people, in order to be fit for a Sanhedrin. B'Gemar Mefarish Keneged Mi. The Gemara will explain what does that number correspond to. And Masayim Ushloshim, the opinion of Reb Nechemia, it has to have 230. Dehainu Chav Gimel Asirios, that comes out to 23 times 10. Sheyehei Kol Echan Mi Bezdin Sar Ala Sara. This way, every single judge in the court is like an officer over 10 people. Debatzer Me Asar Lo Eshkechan Srara, because less than 10 people, that's not called really being a leader, and so therefore again it needs to be a minimum population of 230. And the Gemara says, Atu gezelos v'chavalos lav dinei mamanis. Ninu, aren't gezelos and chavalos, isn't that included in dinei mamanis? Why does the Mishnah say dinei mamanis is with 3 judges, and then it mentions gezelos and mentions chavalos? And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Avo says, Mahen katani. The Mishnah is explaining what are examples, again, of dinei mamanis. Mahen dinei mamanis, what's dinei mamanis? Gezelos v'chavalos. Gezelos v'chavalos is considered to be like dinei mamanis. And the Gemara says, Aval hodos v'halvos lo, but hodos and halvos, that is not included in dinei mamanis, so tzricha, and therefore it's necessary. Ditana dinei mamanis, because if it only said dinei mamanis, havamina dafilo hodos v'halvos, I would think that includes even hodos and halvos, admissions and loans. So tana gezelos v'chavolos, that's why it says gezelos v'chavolos. V'itana gezelos v'chavolos v'lo katani dinei mamanis. If it said gezelos and chavolos and it didn't say dinei mamanis, havamina hu adin dafilo hodos v'halvos, I would also say that also includes even hodos and halvos. V'haide katani gezelos v'chavolos, and the only reason why it says specifically gezelos and chavolos is mishum de ikor gimel dechsivi, because in general the main area where it's written about having 3 judges is b'gezelos v'chavolos ksivi. That's written in the context of gezelos and chavolos. Gezelos, where do we see that by gezelos? Dechsiv, as it's written, v'nikra balabayis elu Elohim, so it talks about coming to the court. And chavolos, where do we see that by chavolos? Mali chaval begufo, because what difference is there if a person wounds somebody in his body? And mali chaval b'mamona, what difference is there if he wounds him in his money? And therefore we know it by chavolos as well. And so therefore Tana Mahin Dinei Mamanis, therefore the Tana teaches what Dinei Mamanis are we talking about over here. Gezelos v'chavolos, we're talking about gezelos and chavolos. Aval hodos v'halvos lo, but we're not referring to hodos and halvos. And Rashi explains, Mahen Kotani, the Mishnah is giving examples of what is Dinei Mamanis, specific examples of Gezelos and Chavolos. Hai Gezelos v'Chavolos Perusha, the Dinei Mamanis, who Gezelos and Chavolos is an explanation what we mean by Dinei Mamanis. Delotem kol Dinei Mamanis b'mashma. Don't think that all Dinei Mamanis are included. V'lemu'ute halvos v'hodos. We're coming to exclude halvos and hodos. Shein boin al gemilas chasadim. Those happen because of chesed v'ikon ilas delos b'fnei lovin. There's a possibility of the door closing before borrowers. Marmina Lekaman, all of this will be explained as we go on. Hilkach Ma'itinu, therefore they're excluded, they're not included in the law of the Mishnah over here. Ulekaman Mefarish Mimayim Ma'itinu, and the Gemara will explain further on what halacha exactly are we excluding Hodos and Halvos from. Hodos v'Halvos, Shneyan al Iskei Milvahin, these are both talking about loans. Hodos Shabaladun Be'edei Hodah, when we talk about Hodos, we mean that there are witnesses over here that say the person admitted. Shemevi Edim Sha'omrim B'fanenu Hodalo, that the person brings witnesses that say in front of us this person admitted that he owes money for this loan. And Halvos Shabaladun Be'edei Halva. Halvos means that we're going to bring witnesses of Halva that saw the loan. Shemeidin B'fanenu Halveu, they'll testify that we saw the loan was made and he owes the money. V'halo Kofer B'shtein, and the person is denying. V'chiyai Lishna Tuva Ika B'hach Mechilta, we find this language throughout. Hodah Achar Hodah, Halva Achar Halva, Mitzdarfen B'Perek Gimel, Gabe Edim Zomamin. And Rashi continues, Tana Gezelos v'chavolos leperusha. We teach in the Mishnah Gezelos and Chavolos to explain what we mean by Dinei Mamanis, again to say that it's just Gezelos v'chavolos, and we're coming to exclude Hodos and Halvos from some aspect of halacha that's in the Mishnah. V'nikra bal habayis elho Elohim, the pasuk says V'nikra bal habayis elho Elohim. Again, that's where we find the idea of three judges by Gezelos and Chavolos. This pasuk specifically by Gezelos. Midakasav b'parsha Elohim Gimel Zimnei. Now, how do we see three judges? Because it says the word Elohim here three times. Nafkal under ba'inan shlosha. That's how we know that you need three judges. V'hai kraksib b'shomer chinam. Now this pasuk is written by a shomer chinam. V'zeh to'ano shashalach yad b'pikdono. And the person is saying that the person misappropriated what he was supposed to be watching as a shomer chinam. He used the pikadon. Dahainu gezelos. Therefore, that really is gezelos. And again, that's a reference to three judges by gezelos. And in terms of chavolos, we say mali chaval begufo, mali chaval b'mamona. What difference does it make if he wounds him in his body or in his money? Once we already know three judges by chovel b'mamono, so af chovel begufo b'chlal. The same is true when a person wounds another person's body. Hilkach b'hanami ksiv bei. Therefore, also again over there, also we're going to have that same halach of three judges. V'lotana dinei mamanis. Now, if it wouldn't have said the word dinei mamanis in the Mishnah, hava amina hanach mishum devegavayu kasav nakalu, then I would have said, since the psukim actually mentioned specifically three judges by gezelos and chavolos, that's why we mention it in the Mishnah. Uliolam hu adin ladinei milvin. I would think the same is true when it comes to loans. Lahachi tana dinei mamanis. That's why it says in the Mishnah both the words dinei mamanis v'tana umahein dinei mamanis gezelos v'chavolos, and gives the specific examples of gezelos and chavolos. Lemuute hodos v'halvos, to exclude hodos v'halvos, as we'll see, they're excluded from a particular part of the halacha. Timkein dekulan b'mashma came in the tana dinei mamanis nishtok, because if it meant all of these examples, hodos and halvos as well, then once it says dinei mamanis, it could have said nothing further. The fact that it says dinei mamanis and gezelos and chavolos, that tells you just gezelos v'chavolos, and again to exclude hodos v'halvos in some regard. And the Gemara continues, Ulamai, and for what exactly are hodos and halvos excluded? Ilema delo ba'inan shlosha. If you're going to say that you don't require three judges by hodos and halvos, that's not true. V'yamar Rabbi Avo, but Rabbi Avo says, Shnayim shadanu dinei mamanis ledivrei hakol ein dineihem din, that if two people judge a case of dinei mamanis, everybody agrees that that is not a good din, that's not considered to be a good court case, so you certainly need three people. So we can't be excluding hodos and halvos from the requirement of three judges. Ella, rather, what are we excluding them from? The lo ba'inan mumchin. When it comes to hodos and halvos, there's no requirement that the judges be experts. And the Gemara continues, well, my kosavar, well, what exactly does the Tana of our Mishnah hold? I kosavar eruv parshios kasav kan. If the Tana of our Mishnah holds that there's a mixture of parshios by the pasuk of ki huzeh, the pasuk of ki huzeh is the pasuk of modeh v'mixas, and we'll see in Rashi exactly what the Gemara means here. But if you're going to say eruv parshios kasav kan, liboy nami mumchin, there actually should be a requirement of mumchin when it comes to loans. V'i kosavar ein eruv parshios kasav kan. But if you hold there's no mixture of parshios over here, so shlosha lamali. So then when it comes to hodos and halvos, where do we know that you need to have three judges? And the Gemara says, Liolam kasavar erev parshios kasav kan. Really, the Tana of our Mishnah holds that there is a mixture of parshios over here. And again, if you hold there's a mixture of parshios, there should be a requirement of mumchin. And so the Gemara says, Uvadinhu deli boy nami mumchin. And really, that should be the law. Really, we should say that mumchin is required, expert judges are required. And the reason we don't require expert judges, Mishum de Rabbi Chanina, it's because of the teaching of Rabbi Chanina. The Yamar Rabbi Chanina, because Rabbi Chanina said, Dvar Torah, that on a Doraisa level, Echad dinei mamanis v'echad dinei nefar. nefashos, whether we're dealing with monetary cases, whether we're dealing with capital cases, b'derishu v'chakira, you have to have a full investigation of all of the evidence of the testimony. And Rashi explains, ulamai hilchas hashayrinu tanu ledinei milva lemutin humai, and for what exactly are we leaving off dinei milva in the Mishnah? What are we coming to exclude? Divrei hakola lekamon, later on we'll say that everybody agrees, koi depligi b'pshara v'ashmi'inon, Rabbi Avod v'din kulu, modu d'v'inon gimel, we're going to say later on that everybody agrees again, you need 3 judges in these cases, mumchin, and so then the Gemara says what you don't need is experts, means to say smuchin, you don't need judges with smicha, v'natlu rishus min nasi ladon, people that got rishus, permission from the nasi to judge. Kedamin l'kaman b'perkin, we'll explain this later on in the parak. Umay kosavar tana didon demoitinu, and so the Gemara then asked, well, what does the Tana of our Mishnah hold that we're excluding hodos and halvos from the requirement of mumchin? Ikosavar eruv parshios ksivkan, if the Tana of our Mishnah holds that there is a mixture of parshios here, the ikolaman damer b'hagos aleitzim, because there is one opinion in hagos aleitzim and baba kama sha parshios aksuvas be'ela hamishpatim mu'uravav, that the parshios, the sections in parshas mishpatim, are mixed up. Sheyesh mikra kasu b'parsha zu she'enu yachol amud b'elam miparsha acheres. You have some psukim in one parsha that really should be in another parsha. Kagon asher yomar ki huzeh, like we find the pasuk says ki huzeh, and that's again a reference to modim and mixas. The alfinan minei modim and mixas hatayna. We learn from those words in the pasuk the idea that a modim and mixas yishava, that if somebody admits partially to a claim, then he's supposed to take an oath. Shekasa b'shomer chinam. Now that those words of those psukim are written in the context of shomer chinam, and so there is one mandomer that says lava shomer chinam koi. Even though it's written by shomer chinam, it's not going on a case of shomer chinam. The shomer nafal b'shelo hodu b'mixas chayav and lishava, because when it comes to shomerim, when it comes to guards, to watchmen, they, even if they don't have a partial admission, they have to swear. The hodah mixas hatayna parshas dim kesef talvakoi, because according to this approach, the idea of modim mixas is going on a regular case of loans. The hasamu the bayinan hodah mixas, that's where you need to have modim mixas to have to take a shvua. V'lo moda klum, if you don't admit at all by a case of a loan, chazakim tainas hatovei emes lo hayachol zel lo hayspanav. Then there's already a presumption that if this person was telling the truth, the other person would not be able to brazenly deny and lie about the situation, negdo, against him, velomar lo hilvisani, and say that you didn't lend me at all. Hilka chafilu shvua lo boy. Therefore, if the person does go ahead and deny the entire thing, we say he doesn't even need a shvua. It's only by modim mixas that a shvua is needed specifically by loans. Avol bepikadon deleka gemilas chasadim. But when it comes to a deposit where the person didn't even do you a favor, you're just watching over this thing, this item for the person. So may is panav v'kofer hakol. A person is totally willing to be brazen and deny everything, even if it's a lie. Uvay shvua, and therefore a shvua will be needed by pikadon, by a shomer, even if it's kofer hakol. Now, if the Tana of our Mishnah held that the pasuk of ki huzeh is by a loan, harei nemar Elohim b'haikra, it actually says Elohim by this pasuk, the mashma mamchin, which also says that by a loan, by halvos, you need experts. Lashon surora of rabbonos, that's an idea of leadership, of rabbonos, of authority. Kinemetar gaminon reina saticha Elohim lefaro lashon rabbonos v'liboy mumchin, and so then there should be a requirement of mumchin by halvos. Because savar the haikra lav b'halva mishtay, and if the Tana of our Mishnah holds that this pasuk of ki huzeh is not by loans, so then shloshim and olin. So then where do we even know that by halva you need to have 3 judges by halva? How do you know you need 3 judges by halva? Hamitlas Elohim nafkol on the kaman. We learn out from the 3 Elohims. Ve'Elohim b'halva lo ksiv. It doesn't say Elohim by halva. That's a carryover from saying eruv parshios. Mishum de Rabbi Chanina. And so then ultimately the Gemara said, really, the Tana of our Mishnah holds that there is a mixture of parshios over here, and not only should you require 3 judges, you should require experts as well. You should require smuchin as well. But it's because of Rabbi Chanina, v'takanta de Rabbanan, who it's actually an institution from the Rabbanan that you don't require mumchin, because again, really, it should have been on a doraisa level that both dinei nefashos and dinei mamanis need bedrisha v'chakira. They need drisha and chakira, which means sarach livdok eso edim. You need to investigate the witnesses, be'eza yom, be'eza shah helveu, what day, what time was the loan, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph.